US President Barack Obama gives a rousing address to the African Union. The world prepares for the first ever Hepatitis Summit in Glasgow. And a video of Tom Cruise goes viral as the 53-year-old dangles precariously from a turboplane. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening, I'm Lina Moudou. This is Africa 54. Vincent McCurry is off today. U.S. President Barack Obama is on his way home to America, but before leaving Africa, he gave a wide-ranging farewell speech to the 54-nation African Union in Addis Ababa. Mr. Obama's rousing address wrapped up a landmark trip to Kenya and Ethiopia by hailing Africa's extraordinary progress, while noting that such progress can only be sustained through continued development and democracy for all. The president also reiterated the importance of security across Africa.
Africa's progress will also depend on security and peace, because an essential part of human dignity is being safe and free from fear. In Angola, Mozambique, Liberia, Sierra Leone, we've seen conflicts end and countries work to rebuild. But from Somalia and Nigeria to Mali and Tunisia, terrorists continue to target innocent civilians. Many of these groups claim the banner of religion, but hundreds of millions of African Muslims know that Islam means peace, and we must call groups like Al-Qaeda, ISIL, Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, we must call them what they are: murderers. In the face of threats, Africa and the African Union has shown leadership. Because of the AU force in Somalia, Al-Shabaab controls less territory and the Somali government is growing stronger. In Central Africa, the AU-led mission continues to degrade the Lord's Resistance Army. In the Lake Chad Basin, forces from several nations with the backing of the AU are fighting to end Boko Haram's senseless brutality. And today we salute all those who serve to protect the innocent, including so many brave African peacekeepers.
President Obama also said that democracy in Africa was threatened when presidents did not stand aside at the end of constitutional term limits, and pointed to violence in Burundi, where the president has secured a third term.
Africa's democratic progress is also at risk when leaders refuse to step aside when their terms end. Now, let me be honest with you. I do not understand this. I am in my second term. It has been an extraordinary privilege for me to serve as the President of the United States. I cannot imagine a greater honor or a more interesting job. I love my work. But under our Constitution, I cannot run again. I can't run again. I actually think I'm a pretty good president. I think if I ran, I could win. But I can't. So there's a lot that I'd like to do to keep America moving, but the law is the law. And no one person is above the law, not even the president. And I'll be honest with you, I'm looking forward to life after being president. When a leader tries to change the rules in the middle of the game just to stay in office, it risks instability and strife, as we've seen in Burundi. And this is often just a first step down a perilous path. And sometimes you'll hear a leader say, well, I'm the only person who can hold this nation together. If that's true, then that leader has failed to truly build their nation. You look at Nelson Mandela. Madiba, like George Washington, forged a lasting legacy, not only because of what they did in office, but because they were willing to leave office and transfer power peacefully. And just as the African Union has condemned coups and illegitimate transfers of power, the AU's authority and strong voice can also help the people of Africa ensure that their leaders abide by term limits and their constitutions. Nobody should be president for life.
Finally, Mr. Obama emphasized the need for Africa to be more respectful of its women and girls, especially their minds and bodies.
When girls cannot go to school, and grow up not knowing how to read or write, that denies the world future women engineers, future women doctors, future women business owners, future women presidents. That sets us all back. That's a bad tradition, not providing our girls the same education as our sons. I was saying in Kenya, nobody would put out a football team and then just play half the team. You'd lose. The same is true when it comes to getting everybody an education. You can't leave half the team off, our young women. So as part of America's support for the education and the health of our daughters, my wife, Michelle, is helping to lead a global campaign, including a new effort in Tanzania and Malawi, with a simple message. Let girls learn. Let girls learn so they grow up healthy and they grow up strong. Africa is the beautiful, strong women that these girls grow up to become. The single best indicator of whether a nation will succeed is how it treats its women. When women have health care and women have education, families are stronger, communities are more prosperous, children do better in school, nations are more prosperous. Look at the amazing African women here in this hall. If you want your country to grow and succeed, you have to empower your women. And if you want to empower more women, America will be your partner. Let's work together. Let's work together to stop sexual assault and domestic violence. Let's make clear that we will not tolerate rape as a weapon of war. It's a crime, and those who commit it must be punished. Let's lift up the next generation of women leaders who can help fight injustice and forge peace and start new businesses and create jobs. And some might hire some men, too. We'll all be better off when women have equal futures.
And a day before his address to the AU, President Obama spoke highly of Ethiopia's role in fighting terrorism in East Africa. Mr. Obama also urged the country's leaders to protect human rights and ensure good governance. VOA's Aruponde has more on the president's talks with the Prime Minister of Ethiopia in Addis Ababa.
Mr. Obama said the deadly blast that struck a hotel in Somalia's capital just as he landed Sunday in Ethiopia signals a very real threat facing the region.
Yesterday's bombing in Mogadishu reminds us that terrorist groups like al-Shabaab offer nothing but death and destruction and have to be stopped.
It was against this security backdrop that talks between President Obama and Prime Minister Hailemariam Desalegn took place Monday in Ethiopia's ornate national palace. Mr. Obama, the first sitting U.S. president to visit Ethiopia, pledged assistance to help the country fight extremists and praised Ethiopian forces for helping to shrink the territory al-Shabaab controls in Somalia.
They have one of the most effective militaries on the continent. And as I noted in my earlier remarks, they are also one of the biggest contributors to peacekeeping. And so they're averting a lot of bloodshed and a lot of conflict because of the effectiveness of their military, and we want to make sure that we're supporting that.
But along with praise for Ethiopia's military might came frank discussions on the country's human rights record. Prime Minister Hailemariam's party took 100% of the seats in May parliamentary elections and is accused of rounding up dozens of opposition members and journalists in so-called counterterrorism operations.
We want to work on this issue. It's our concern. But something has to be understood, that this is a fledgling democracy. And we are coming out of centuries of undemocratic practices and culture in this country.
While President Obama called Mr. Hailemariam's government democratically elected, he said, as in Kenya, the country still has more work to do when it comes to practicing certain democratic principles.
Making sure to open additional space for journalists, for media, for opposition voices will strengthen rather than inhibit the agenda that the Prime Minister and the ruling party has put forward.
Both leaders agreed on the need to find a resolution to the deepening crisis in South Sudan. Following Monday's bilateral talks, President Obama convened a meeting with the leaders of Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, and the African Union in hopes of finding a path to peace. The U.S. leader warned time is running out as the humanitarian situation in South Sudan grows worse by the day. Aru Pandey, VOA News, Addis Ababa.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54, and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, the world eyes Greece as it struggles to survive a crippling debt crisis. Stay with us.
I wanted to present music and a side of American culture that is most important to me, that is a part of who I am. They're going to get some incredible performances. That's one of the things I love, bringing these artists in so you can get to see them do what they do. It's soul music, and that's what music is. It's that which comes from the soul.
It's time now for our Tuesday Business Report, and joining us live from New York is Africa 54 business correspondent Alexis Christoforous. Alexis, during his speech, President Obama mentioned the need to create jobs when he spoke at the Africa Union. Tell us about that.
That's right, Lenore. President Obama urged African leaders to make job creation a top priority. We saw earlier him speaking at the African Union in Ethiopia. He became the first sitting American president to speak before the AU, and he stressed that time is of the essence if Africa is to create millions more jobs than it is doing right now. He said the U.S. is ready to help in that endeavor. Obama also called on Africa's leaders to make their countries more attractive to foreign investment by cleaning up corruption and supporting human rights. Lenore?
So tell us about the situation with the oil. It's never a dull day in the oil pits. What's going on there?
For that, you can always be sure. Yeah, oil is heading for its biggest monthly decline in 7 years. Investors worry that the global surplus will continue. And British oil giant BP said that second quarter profit tumbled 64% as crude prices continue to slump. Brent for September delivery fell another 1% to $52.85 a barrel. Crude is now trading below $48 a barrel. And it's not just a supply glut that has oil traders heading for the exits. It's also the fear that demand will drop in China, which we know is the world's second largest consumer of energy. Chinese stocks fell another 1% overnight, a day after their biggest one-day loss in 8 years. And investors are worried that the Chinese economy is losing steam and that the government there may start pulling back its support measures for the stock market. One notable analyst who predicted the recent Chinese market crash believes the Shanghai index will fall another 14% in the next 3 weeks before it hits bottom. So tighten your seatbelts. Lenore?
Indeed. Thank you so much for joining us, Alexis. And Africa 54 business reporter Alexis Christoforous reporting live from New York. Now, while the world's eyes have been on Greece as it struggles to survive a crippling debt crisis, campaigners say dozens of other countries, especially in the developing world, are building up dangerous levels of debt. Much of the money is lent by private investors looking for profits, with the industry largely unregulated. Henry Ridgell reports from London.
With banks on the verge of collapse and the country battling to stay in the Eurozone, the world's focus has been on Greece. But campaigners say the potential is building for a full-blown debt crisis in many parts of the developing world.
There's a huge boom in lending happening, especially to some of the most impoverished countries in the world at the moment. So we're worried that unless action is taken, they could end up in new debt crises again.
Among the 20 countries described as most vulnerable to a debt crisis is Mozambique.
Its economy has been booming massively. It's had huge amounts of lending to the country, but actually poverty is increasing at the same time, and inequality is increasing. So the loans are not necessarily helping in tackling the problems of the country.
Nations often borrow on international markets to develop infrastructure, but the Jubilee Debt Campaign says it is often misspent. The group says 20 nations are already mired in debt crises, with many more vulnerable to economic turbulence. It's all tied to the recent financial crisis, says Judith Tyson of the Overseas Development Institute, speaking via Skype from Greece.
We've really seen a surge of debt being issued because of the search for yield, which is where investors in primarily in Europe and in the United States are looking for new investments because of the very low interest rates in our economies. And one of the places that they've invested large amounts of money is in sovereign debt in developing countries.
Other countries have been burdened with high debts for decades, says Jones, citing Jamaica as an example.
And actually, since the 1990s, they've had huge government surpluses, but the debt has remained because the interest is just so high and the economy has been depressed in the attempt to pay these debts.
That is the argument put forward by the Greek government. But Europe, led by Germany, insists spending cuts and reforms are the only way to revive the economy. For indebted developing countries, there are additional risks.
There's a bigger problem is that the debts are all owed in foreign currencies, like the dollar or the euro. And so when a country has a currency devaluation, the debt payments shoot up.
Campaigners are calling for much tighter regulation of lending and debt write-offs for those countries already in crisis. Henry Ridgell for VOA News, London.
The World Health Organization says there is an urgent need for countries to enhance action to prevent viral hepatitis infection and to ensure that people who have been infected are diagnosed and offered treatment. July 28th is World Hepatitis Day, and this year the WHO is focusing particularly on hepatitis B and C. Together they cause approximately 80% of all liver cancer deaths and kill close to 1.4 million people every year. The WHO is alerting people to the risks of contracting hepatitis from unsafe blood, unsafe injections, and sharing drug injection equipment. Some 11 million people who inject drugs have hepatitis B or C infection. Children born to mothers with hepatitis B or C and sex partners of people with hepatitis are also at risk of becoming infected. The organization emphasizes that hepatitis can be prevented. Stephen Victor is team leader of WHO's Global Hepatitis Program.
We have in hand today all the tools that we need to prevent new hepatitis infections and prevent hepatitis deaths. We know how the virus is transmitted. It's transmitted primarily through blood and through bodily fluids. And to prevent it, we have 4 key messages that we're promoting. One is get informed, find out about the routes of transmission and what can be done. Get vaccinated. There's a very effective hepatitis B vaccine that can protect for your whole life. Demand safe injections. Many infections of hepatitis B and C occur in healthcare settings because of syringes and needles are reused. So we want people to be aware of this risk and to make sure that the injections that they receive are with sterile, new syringes. And lastly, get tested and get treated.
A cataract is a clouding of the lens in the eye leading to a decrease in vision. They may affect one or both eyes and often develop slowly. The World Health Organization says 285 million people are estimated to be visually impaired worldwide. 39 million are blind and 246 have low vision. About 90% of the world's visually impaired live in low-income settings, and cataracts remain the leading cause of blindness in middle and low-income countries. Most cataracts are related to aging, although occasionally children may be born with the condition, or cataract may develop after an injury, inflammation, or disease. Now, Help Me See is a global campaign to eliminate blindness caused by untreated cataract. Joining us from our studio in New York is Jacob Mohan Tazatu, President and CEO of Help Me See. Mr. Tazatu, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you very much.
So your organization has been working around the world trying to reverse cataract, and Africa has been on your agenda in countries like Togo. Now you are in Madagascar. Tell us about what you are doing there, this new campaign you're launching in Madagascar.
Africa is an emerging continent of the 21st century with 1.2 billion population and about 6 million people, and according to our estimates, blind due to cataract. In Madagascar, among the 21 million people, we estimate there are at least about 1 million people who will need the support for cataract surgery in the next 5 to 6 years. And our goal is to eliminate cataract blindness in Madagascar. And we just launched the Madagascar campaign 2 weeks ago. Our goal is to train, and the first goal is to train at least about 15 to 20 cataract surgeons in Madagascar in partnership with the Ministry of Health, the Lions Club in Madagascar, the Lions First program, and with the Help Me See technology. The Help Me See technology is based on simulator-based training. The simulators are aviation-grade, high-fidelity simulators which can train cataract surgeons to proficiency, and along with our surgical kit technology, which eliminates the infection rates, introducing the community-based surveillance system. Okay. We expect to achieve that in Madagascar.
Okay, now what type of challenges have you come across as you work in these countries?
The biggest challenge is lack of adequately trained cataract specialists. The medical surgical training requires to be significantly improved, and there are very, very few number of surgeons against the number of population who requires those surgeries. In generally speaking, in most of the countries in Africa, there is less than one ophthalmologist for 1 million population. That need to change.
And you will have achieved about 200,000 surgeries, am I correct, in Madagascar?
That's correct. Help Me See has supported 200,000 surgeries, and the 200,000th surgery was done in Madagascar in the hospital in Antananarivo by Dr. Amy and one patient, Madame Florentine, living in Antananarivo. Now, that's a level of information that we can provide to the local surgical partners and to the local community so that they can solve the problem.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us, and good luck in your work. And that was Jacob Mohan Tazatu. He's President and CEO of Help Me See. It's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Kenyans and Ethiopians tweet as Obama mania hits East Africa. We'll be right back.
When someone has to pay a bribe just to start a business or go to school or get an official to do the job they're supposed to be doing anyway, that's not the African way.
Auntie.
Welcome back. And here it's what is trending. It's no surprise President Barack Obama's trip to Africa is not only historic but trending on social media. Kenyans and Ethiopians started tweeting way ahead of his arrival in East Africa. Kenyans used hashtag Obama in Kenya, and Ethiopians followed suit with hashtag Obama in Ethiopia. Kenyans had a record 85,000 tweets, while Ethiopia had just over 10,000, primarily due to internet access. Ethiopia's internet reaches 1.9%, while Kenya's peaks at 39%. Social media buzz showed a sense of pride that Obama had a strong connection to Africa. In Kenya, he was at ease greeting Kenyans in Swahili, but stumbled a little bit, thanking Ethiopians in Amharic. Next up, a Mission Impossible agent Ethan Hunt, Tom Cruise has pulled off some major feats. But what you've seen up until now take a back seat to Mission Impossible, Rogue Nation's standout opener, in which Cruise 53 dangles precariously from a 4-engine turboprop plane that pushes triple-digit speeds during a steep vertical takeoff. Cruise famously insists on performing his own stunts, and Rogue Nation was no different. A behind-the-scenes video of the stunt has gone viral on social media, and the movie opens in the US on July 31st. And finally, a dream come true for shopaholics. Many people have experienced wandering through a huge mall unable to find a certain store, or leaving a store without the intended item because it's too hard to find. A new mobile app called Indo-Atlas uses magnetic positioning, which detects small changes in the Earth's magnetic field created by the metal inside a building's walls. Once users find the store, the app also lets them know if there are any promotions going on. Indo-Atlas has so far received $15 million in investment. So far, the company just signed a deal with top China search tool Baidu. And that's what's trending today, Lenore.
Thank you so much, Esther. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight, at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 300 and 600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks for watching, and good night from Washington.
Real talk, real issues, the real Africa. It's time to get the scoop, Monday through Friday on VOA. Find your time zone and get the scoop.
We are able to touch on things that are important to people on an everyday basis.
Hello and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54.
In a lively half hour, news, sports, health, lifestyle information, comments from our viewers. Africa 54, the best for Africa, about Africa. Join us only on VOA.